Welcome everybody, welcome all our Torah Anytime viewers. We are going to do today, B'ezrat Hashem, the story of Purim. We did the story of Hanukkah a few months back, and it got a lot of good feedback from it. It's funny because people usually never get the basics. People are always learning the advanced stuff when they learn about Purim. Meanwhile, they don't know the actual basic story. And in fact, when I was learning this, when I first actually read all the midrashim on Purim, it was years ago, and I went through the yeshiva system, and I'm like, I never knew the story, and we've heard the story every single year, but yet I've never heard the story, and most likely you'll never hear you have never heard the story like you'll B'ezrat Hashem hear tonight. So it's going to be not just a story, but it's going to be the story with all the details that you never usually hear. And we'll begin. The way that it begins, it's going to begin a little bit like an historical context on Purim. So whoever hates history, just bear with me. It's going to be a story, but in the beginning, it's going to start off as a little bit of history. So the destruction of, first let's understand, we spoke about this in Hanukkah, but let's just clarify, when the story of when the destructions happened of the temples, and where the story of Hanukkah and Purim fit in that play. So the first was the destruction of the temple. The temple was destroyed in the year 3,338 from creation. It was, if you wanted the English date, it was July 16th, 423 BCE. That's when the temple was destroyed. That's when the first temple was destroyed. And after that came this... 423 BCE, before Common Era.
First temple?
First temple.
I thought it was 586.
No, 420...
What's 586?
I don't know. Actually, I could probably tell you what's 586. It's a year. That's the beginning. But in any case, while I look for the timeline, after the actually I don't have anything 586. After the destruction of the first temple, 70 years later came the rebuilding of the second temple. Between those two time slots is the story of Purim. Then you have the first temple was destroyed. Then you have the story of Purim. Then you have the building of the second temple, and then after that you have the story of Hanukkah, and after that you have the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, the second Bet HaMikdash. Clear? Make sense? Okay. So now when the temple was destroyed, there was a prophecy by Jeremiah, and if you want to look it up, it's Jeremiah chapter 25, verse 11 and verse 12. And in there, it says that the exile is going to last for 70 years. The problem was, nowhere does it say when the 70 years starts. So this got a lot of confusion. People weren't sure when you actually start counting the 70 years. Do you count it from the year, and we're going to do dates very little. We're just going to start off with dates. Do you start counting, and we're going to do the Jewish dates. From the year 3,319, which is the year that Nebuchadnezzar assumed the throne of Babel. Or maybe it's 3 years later, which is the year 3,321, in the year which the first time the 70 years is actually mentioned. Or possibly it's 4 years after that, which is the year 3,327, which is the first major exile. Or maybe it is 11 years after that, which is the year 3,338, which was the destruction of the temple. So we see over here that variance is about 20 years. So they weren't sure when to start the actual counting for when the actual temple is going to be rebuilt. So this came a lot of confusion. This is going to be important when we come to the story. So now let's look of our big players, and for whoever's listening online in audio, I'm showing up a whatever that's on, I don't know, board. I don't know what it is. So a whiteboard. So there are three players in this story in the beginning. There was three, and if you look at it, so you have Babylon, which is Babel. This is the it's going to be three countries at play. So you have Babylon, you have Persia, and you have Madai. So each of these three originally were separate countries. Now, Babylon, but Nebuchadnezzar was the one who destroyed the temple. After he came in, after he ruled about maybe 26 years or so. After that, he had a son, and then his son was Belshazzar. This is the person who we're going to be focusing on a little bit for the history. So at this point, Belshazzar is ruling Babylon. Now, Persia was ruled by somebody by the name of Astyages. So this guy, he had a daughter, and this is her name, Mandane, I guess you pronounce it. And what happened was she was seduced by one of the advisors, one of the ministers in the kingdoms, one of the advisors of the king, and she became pregnant. And the king got really, really upset because of this, and he had this advisor killed, and he took his daughter and he threw her into prison. And then when the baby was born, he took the baby and he didn't kill the baby, but he put the baby in a mountain to sort of die out of starvation. somehow by miraculous, providence of God, a dog appears, and a dog actually somehow nursed this child until it was big enough. Yeah, sounds like in a fairy tale. So Disney might take it. So.
Sounds like a Jungle Book.
Yeah, so he's actually nursed by a dog, and that's why his name in his Persian name was Kush. Kush in the ancient Persia was dog. In English, it's translated as Cyrus. So Cyrus is someone that's bad. So that's how Cyrus came into being. Now, when Cyrus grew older and he was literally living in the forest, his profession was he was a professional robber, thievery, and he had a nice big clan, and he went and he would murder people and steal people, and his posse grew. He had a big gang, and when his grandfather, which is the king, Astyages, heard about this, he sent a whole army to go and kill out the entire army, including his grandson Cyrus. So Cyrus went, and they fought a battle. And Cyrus won, like it wasn't even, it was like child's game for him. He actually defeated the entire army that his grandfather sent. Now, Cyrus says, listen, I defeated him. He goes to the capital, and he wages war on his grandfather, and he ended up killing his grandfather and taking hold of the throne of Persia. So now Cyrus, what's so funny about that? So
Behind the scenes of
this is behind the scene. Yeah, this is what is it called? The prequel? We're doing the...
prequel. Like anything royal is always so dramatic.
Politics, there's always politics. Most of the time you don't know it. You think this wasn't politics getting Trump into... You know how hard the Russians had... I'm just kidding. What? What was the question? No questions. Okay. So then you have... So Cyrus at this point in time. So now you have Belshazzar ruling Babylon. Cyrus ruling Persia. Now Madai, there was a guy by the name of Darius. He was ruling Madai. And he had a daughter. He heard what happened with Cyrus, and he's like, listen, maybe we should make some sort of an alliance together. I think that's a good idea. And Cyrus agreed, and that's when Cyrus went and he married this daughter. So they got married. Out of their union, this is where Ahasuerus comes by. This is this is where he comes into play. Now, what happened was, before this actually comes into play, so Cyrus and Darius go and they sort of make an alliance with their two countries, and they're thinking, listen, since Babylon was the ruling empire, they said, why are we, two strong countries, got to pay tribute to the ruling empire? We're strong. Let's go fight against Babylon. So they put their armies together, and they went to fight against Babylon. However, Bavel, which is Babylon, defeated them. They had about 1,000 Jewish warriors that were able to somehow get rid of whatever the army there was that Persia and Madai sent. So at this point in time, Belshazzar defeated his opponents, which was Persia and Madai, and Belshazzar decided that he is going to throw a party. Why? Two reasons he's going to throw a party. Number one is because of his defeat, is because of the war that he just won. Number two, he's also going to throw a party because he counted 70 years from when the temple was destroyed. He made a calculation. And he said, listen, it came 70 years and the temple wasn't rebuilt. That means that if it wasn't rebuilt at this point in time, it's never going to rebuild. And he's going to make a party with that. And he used in this party the kilim, the vessels of the Bet HaMikdash. So he actually drank from the kilim of the Bet HaMikdash, and he actually used the kilim of the Bet HaMikdash. During this party, there was a very famous story, if you're familiar with the Tanakh, he was getting drunk and he was drinking, and the magical hand appeared, and with like a pen, and wrote on the wall. It wrote on the wall, Mane Takulu Farsin, if I'm not mistaken. So he sees this in Hebrew, even though it's in Aramaic, which is their language that they spoke, but it was in Hebrew. He didn't understand this, so he calls over Daniel, the prophet Daniel. And he says, tell me what's going on over here. What is this magic words that are on my wall? And he says, this is a sign that God is going to pay you back for using the vessels of the temple. And he went, and there was a servant that overheard this. And he says, you know what, this other side, Persia and Madai, are gaining a lot of power. It's only a matter of time before they take over Babylon. And he says, now I have a sign directly from God that they're going to take it over. He says, if I stick around over here, when they take over, I'm going to be killed. He says, better that I go, assassinate the king, which is Belshazzar, bring his head to Persia and Madai, and then I'll gain, honor, and also, I'll be able to live. So that night, as he's, late in the night, the slave goes and murders his master, the king, which is Belshazzar. And word came out to Cyrus and Darius, and they went over and they captured Babylon as well. So while all this tumult, this noise was going on in the palace of the king of Belshazzar, Vashti wakes up. Vashti was a daughter of Belshazzar. So this is how Vashti comes into the play into the story. So she was a daughter of Belshazzar. She was 12 years old at the time, and they basically took over the entire palace. And Vashti runs into the father's main room and falls down on the feet, on the feet, sort of bowing down. And when she gets up, she doesn't see her father. She sees Cyrus and Darius, and they're like, "Who is this girl?" And she saw it was a very, very beautiful girl. So they realized that there was a daughter of Belshazzar, and they decided that they're going to take her back to their kingdom. So she is spared, and she goes back to their kingdom. Now, Cyrus and Darius both saw what happened if you use the kelim, the vessels of the Bet HaMikdash, and this guy, got killed because of that. They were like, listen, it's not worth it to mess around with the Jewish God. And Cyrus and Darius decided that he is going to go, and they're going to allow it to rebuilding the temple. So he actually, very conveniently forgot about that. And years later, so first it was ruled by Darius and Cyrus. When Darius died, Cyrus was the one who was ruling. He was at this point ruling everything. So when Cyrus was ruling everything, he ordered, one of the first things that he ordered was the temple to be rebuilt. And not only did he order the temple to be rebuilt, but he actually paid the workers. He actually paid the money, sent supplies to Jerusalem so that they could build the temple. Now, about 3 years or so, he died. And when he died, Achashverosh, by the way, Achashverosh was not his name. His actual, if you go to Google and you search Achashverosh, it's going to come up something with Megillah stuff. It's his legal name. If you look at his passport, it would have said Artaxerxes, and that was his actual name.
What is it?
Artaxerxes. Yeah, a very common name nowadays. You see, second most popular name in Persia. No, so it's he was the one. So if you want to search him, that's his actual his name. So after you're with me so far, right? Not too history-ish, right? Okay, we're good. So Cyrus dies. Achashverosh comes into power. Now this is where we sort of get into the Purim story. So Achashverosh, he goes and he ends up marrying Vashti. So these two unite. And this is at the 3rd year of his reign, and this is where the story of Purim begins. So the story of Purim begins with this party that Achashverosh threw. So he actually threw it for 2 reasons. Number one, because he got married to Vashti, so he wanted to make a nice party.
3 years later?
Yeah, he got married to her. She was 18 at the time, right? So she was 12 when she was captured. And when she got married, she was 18. So think of it 6 years after that.
No, but you said he married her and then...
He married her in his 3rd year of reign.
Oh, I thought you said...
Yeah. So in his 3rd year of reign, which she was 18 years old, he went and he married her. So he wanted to throw a big party in honor of the celebration of the marriage. Another reason that he wanted to throw this party was because that he also counted the 70 years. And he said, listen, now I know the real counted. And now I know it didn't come. So if it didn't come now, it's not going to come anymore. And he felt confident enough, and he's going to throw this party. This is also why it was so bad that the Jewish people actually went to this party. You know what he was celebrating? Besides, he was celebrating the temple's not going to be rebuilt. Everyone's like, party, woo, woo. Let's go party. And they don't know they're celebrating. Well, they knew. That's why they weren't allowed to be there. But we'll soon see about his party.
So you said they were paying. This guy was.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Thank you. I left out one detail. Perfect. Thank you.
He did pay for it.
The Cyrus. Thank you so much. Perfect. So Cyrus was actually paying. Thank you. This is what happens when I don't look at my notes. Cyrus was building the Bet HaMikdash, and when Achashverosh came into power, he stopped the building. He was a bad guy from the get-go. He stopped the building he stopped the building. Actually, when he got married, he stopped the building. One of the reasons, actually 2 reasons he stopped the building. Number one, his amazing Eshet Chayil Vashti said, how dare you, my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather worked so hard and they slaved so hard to destroy the temple. You're going to go and rebuild it? And then Haman, also the great advisor, he goes and he says, you know how difficult it is if the Jewish people rebuild Jerusalem. It's so difficult to conquer because the walls are so impenetrable. So he says, if they revolt, you will not be able to overcome them. Better that you don't let them rebuild it. So with pressure that he got from Haman and the pressure that he got from his wife Vashti, he decided he's going to halt the building of the Bet HaMikdash, and he halted it. It didn't finish building. Yeah. So it didn't come into fruition yet. The end of the thing. Okay. So. Another reason that Achashverosh and wanted to throw his party was because he wanted to show off his wealth. He wanted to show off his money. Now, why would you do that? So, first of all, it is very, very beneficial for a kingdom to have a wealthy ruler. If you have a wealthy ruler, then you know that the guy is not going to be inclined to raise taxes because he needs money because it's the next vacation. He's not going to want to raise taxes because he has to go to war, because he has sufficiently enough money. So it's always good to have a ruler with that type of financial backing. Additionally, this is also very important for a rabbi, let's say of a synagogue, of a shul. It is very important for a rabbi to have the full control and power of the shul. If every time that he has to make a decision, he has to go look for the board and make sure they give him a thumbs up and that's okay, he can't actually run a shul like that, because most of the time the board is not so Torah knowledgeable, whatever verbiage that I need to use for that. Okay, so another reason that he wanted to show off his wealth is it's a very, very flattery thing. Imagine you have a friend, and your friend comes over to you and be like, listen, I want to tell you how much I make, I want to show you what's in my bank account. That doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because everyone keeps it very private. But say you have a friend that's so close that is willing to share this information, you think like, wow, like that means you're really close to me. So he wanted to show as how close he is to the people. He says, look, I'm going to open up my storehouse so you could see how much I'm worth. You could see how much I'm, and he was worth a lot. You will soon see on how his party was, how crazy his party was, and you'll see how wealthy he really was. This party, so it was a 180-day party. It's not like one of these like house parties. Imagine how when people plan a wedding, they plan a wedding for about 6 years before they meet the guy, especially the girl side, right? And then finally they go and they then everything goes fast, and they're planning the wedding, and it's nights with sleepless nights, figuring out this, figuring out that, and then it goes off. Imagine making a wedding 180 days in a row, and Achashverosh made it that the menu never repeated itself. He never served the same dish twice. So.
Could they have had back then?
So you're talking about the king who had the king who ruled the world. I'm sure he had resources that most people don't even have today with the internet. So, yeah. So, additionally, the amount of money that he spent for one day would have been enough for it to finance the whole 180-day banquet if he would have done it regular. So if you think about it, the amount of parties that he could have accomplished and completed with just the amount of money that he used for that was 180 times 180, which is 32,400. That's amount of parties that he would have been able to do, which is crazy. You think about those numbers are absurd, and it's not a party for like 500 people, big wedding, 600 people. You're talking about for the entire. Everybody came in for this party. It was a crazy, crazy party, and. So he threw this party for 180 days. After the 180 days was the after party. And the after party was only for his capital. It was a 7-day party. And listen to this. 7-day party. Not so much. He didn't go for 180 days. But he spent as much money as he spent for the 180 days for the 7-day party. So you're talking about right now, what are we talking about? 32,400 times 2. You're talking about 64,800 parties he could have made with the parties that he made. You know how many days that is if you divide that by 365? I don't know. It's years and years of just partying he could have made. And if you think about it, it wasn't like a bunch of people, nice sushi, maybe some steaks. It was a party he satisfied every desire, and we'll soon see except for one. He actually it also says wine. It was very big. It was a lot of wine. It wasn't just it wasn't a dry party. It was a very open bar. Alcohol was pouring away, and not only that, every time that you wanted a drink, you get a cup, and you get to keep the cup. And that cup was made either of gold or silver or jewels. It was a very, very expensive cup. This cup never was. It wasn't like he was like, okay, let's go to the factory, go to China, and give me a bunch 10 million of these types of cups. Every single cup was unique. Every single cup was unique. And not only that, you drink the amount. If let's say you were 20 years old, you got 20-year-old wine. You were 70 years old, you got 70-year-old wine. And it says his party, the wine was flowing. It wasn't like, okay, wait up, we're having a new shipment of cups coming in and wine coming in. As much as you want it, people who literally come with sacks. Be like, you chug it in and throw the thing. You get stock up for a nice, good amount of years, an amount of value of cup and gold that you could get. So his party was literally off the hook. But, however, it was a very big problem because a Jew is not allowed to go to a Gentile's party. People get this confused sometimes when they think they're allowed to go to they think they're allowed to go to a Geisha wedding. It's a very, very big problem. I was giving this. I mentioned this to somebody.
If you don't drink or eat.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be there. What shackles do you have there? Again, if it's your partner in this and you have all these certain questions, you're going to speak to your local Orthodox rabbi. As a general rule, you're not allowed to go. There was one. I have to a non-Jewish party. Yeah.
Oh.
A wedding is a party as well. So there was a. I have a guy that comes to one of my classes, and he's not Jewish. Go figure. Yeah. So he comes to my classes. He's like, wait a minute. But he's friends with a lot of Jews, so they bring him. So he goes, and I said this when he was there, and he was like, wait a minute. That means that my friends are not allowed to come to my wedding? Like, yeah, unless you convert, they're not coming to your wedding, or they're not at least allowed to. So he's like, that's not fair. I didn't make up the rules. So
Isn't that weird?
it's not worth to tell him.
Like a non-Jew coming to your classes. And
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Generally, it's not allowed. You're not allowed to teach a non-Jew Torah unless it's only the Shabbat Mitzvahs Ben Enoch. Unless he wants to convert. If he wants to convert, he's allowed to learn everything.
Maybe he'll decide to convert.
Possibly, I really hope so. For his certain situation, he needs to convert. Yeah. So he. But if let's say there's a non-Jew, I'm not speaking to him. I'm speaking to everybody else. Happens to be who listens the most. All right. Well, that's all the questions, and doesn't have the Yetzirah. Going back to the party. So Achashverosh, this party. There's 5 senses, right? We have. We'll go through them. Out of the 5 senses, he only satisfied 4. For the taste, he had the pleasure of food. Any food that you want, any taste, any desirable pleasure in your palate that you wanted, he had. And then the sight. The sight, he had beautiful hangings, paintings, pictures, curtains. Everything was beautiful for the eyes as well. Then for the smell, he had perfumes, he had gardens, he had roses, he has flowers. Everything was very also nicely smelled. And for the touch, he had beautiful couches, comfortable sofas, and all that you could sit and eat and recline. He satisfied every single pleasure except for the sense of hearing. And he didn't want to do music. Now, why didn't he want to do music? 2 reasons. Number 1, music. If you're let's say giving somebody, if let's say you're putting on music, not everybody has the same taste of music. You can't just close your ears and not hear the music. It'll come in and it's be very uncomfortable. So he says he can't satisfy everybody's musical need. He says if I do, this guy likes classical music, but this guy likes to hear some guy speak really fast and talk about murdering people, aka rap. Then how am I going to satisfy everybody else? So he says, you know what? Better no music. Then he said, you know what? Additionally, music is a very, very strong spiritual power. Music, if you ever realize, brings you into a spiritual state. Music is one of the things that Adam HaRishon was able to take out from Gan Eden. God, he was able to take out, in fact, he was able to take out one thing, and he took out music. And people don't understand how powerful music is. One time I need to do a class just on music. Because people go, yeah, B'ezrat Hashem is one of the, I have like 10,000 titles that are on the way, but there's other time. But music, people listen to non-Jewish music, and they know, they're like, oh, yeah, this is my jam, and they listen to it, and no, classical music is not so much of a problem.
Okay.
But everything else is a problem. You listen to all these whatever. When we speak about music, we'll speak about it. But it lifts you spiritually. It changes you spiritually, and people don't understand. Okay, what's the big deal? I'm driving and putting up the radio. Go to 95.1 if you live in New York. You have the Torah, J-Root radio. You can listen to something Jewish or something kosher. You're not allowed to, people don't understand. Listening to non-Jewish music, it hurts your soul. You don't feel it. But if you don't listen to it for a long time, you'll feel different. And especially, I have people that send me, they're becoming Baal Tshuvas, and they send me this music. I have a non-Jew that's he's in the conversion process. Big tzaddik, he's destined for great things. He loves Jewish music. He loves it, and he's listening to it. He's like, it makes me so, and I'm like, that's the perfect example that I could give. It literally lifts you up, and people don't realize. You listen to all these rappers and all these pop and whatever rock music that's out there. It's destroy you. Yeah, that's better. I don't know.
That guy, the one
Matisyahu?
Converted.
No.
Nisim Black.
Oh, Nisim. Yeah. He also gives classes. You know that.
Have you listened to his rap?
No, I haven't.
Positive.
I haven't.
He talks about Hashem in his rap.
I have to people think I speak fast. Imagine what would happen if I would start rapping. So. So I'm like, it's like you have to, if you want to hear the lyrics in these people, you like literally have to like focus and concentrate, and it's like, it's literally like, whatever it is. So where were we? Okay. Back to the story of Purim. Okay, so now, as you can see, one of his reasons he didn't want to put music is music brings you up to a spiritual state, and he didn't want the Jews to get into a spiritual state. One of the main focus of his party was to get the Jews to sin, because if the Jews start sinning, then for sure God's not going to redeem them with the second temple. So as a secret, he's like, come on, Jews, it's kosher food. They had kosher food. Lot kosher food. He bought the best kosher food. Still, you're not allowed to go to that type of party. And one of the problems was the Jews went to that party. And when the party, listen to this detail. The men and women were not mixed. Talking about party, Jewish party now. The men and women were separate. Not that it wasn't a kosher party by all means, and we'll soon see.
What was the problem with it? It was held by a
Because it's not Jewish.
Why are you not allowed to go to a non-Jewish party?
You said everything was kosher, everything is this.
Very good. So that's what everybody else has. So it's still not allowed. Halacha is,
First of all, halachically it's not allowed. Period. And second of all,
it's
celebrating.
it's also
celebrating the David Hamikdash.
the celebrating. Besides that, it's also one of the reasons. For example, you're not supposed to drink wine with a non-Jew is because we're afraid that they could get too friendly and then you end up marrying into them. Assimilation. So yeah, there's many. It's a whole topic in itself, but. I think I spoke about it once. A mixed. Yeah. All right. So you're getting there. All right. So okay. So the woman's side. The woman, there was a mechitza, but they made it that the woman was on a patio, so the men would be able to look at the woman. But and if I explained this to the guy. I explained this to the guys. You go to the weddings and there are people. These guys, they think they're so inconspicuous. They sit by the bar, drinking that same pina colada that they've bought, poured from the thing, and they just go like this. On the woman's side, as if nobody realizes what you're doing, buddy. And one of the reasons that they feel comfortable doing that is people feel comfortable looking at women more in the distance. You're saying something close to women, you're gonna be like, like that freaky look. From the distance, okay, whatever. So the idea was, let's put them separate. We'll put them in the distance. We'll put the women in the distance, and the men are going to start drinking, and the temptations are going to start working. And this was the idea behind that as well. So. And the Achashverosh, he did not drink, he did not party until the last day of the 7 days of the party. That's when he decided to party. Because until that time, he was an excellent host. He was going around introducing people, giving them, pouring drinks, talking, mingling with the crowd. And the last day, he's like, now it's time to party. And bring out the good stuff. Actually, the whole party was good stuff. And he goes, and in the 7th day, he decided he's going to party. This 7th day was Shabbat. Not only was Shabbat, it was also, there's opinions that say it was also Yom Kippur. So the Jews did not show up to that party on Shabbat because they were afraid that maybe they will inadvertently desecrate the Shabbat. And in fact, this is a piece of information that I missed. One of the reasons that, first of all, this is two pieces of information I missed. I said his Achashverosh, and no, I'm surprised no one asked me this. I said his real name is Artaxerxes. So why do we call him Achashverosh? Let us call him in the thing. Vahibim Artaxerxes. Why is it Achashverosh? So Achashverosh was a title. You know how like Pharaoh was a title for Egyptian rulers. Achashverosh was a title given to him by the people. Why was it given the title Achashverosh? If you break it up, it's Chashrosh, which is literally like making a headache. Achashverosh was a guy that was making everybody have headaches. With all his crazy rules and policies, everyone's going crazy. They were like, oh, you know what, this guy Achash, so they called him Achashverosh. Now, one of the reasons that there's a medrash in Esther Rabbah that says one of the reasons that the Hashem allowed that Haman and Achashverosh to rule over us like they did is because the Jews, and if you want to look it up, they quote this off Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 15 to 21. They said the Jews used to keep their stores open a little bit past the time that they were allowed on Friday for Shabbat. So because they didn't honor the Shabbat the way that they were supposed to, they got punished with the Purim story. So one of the things that Vashti, and we'll soon see, so the big party that happened where everything came down was Shabbat party. And one of the reasons why the Vashti came crashing down on Shabbat was because she knew the power of Shabbat. She used to have women slaves, and they were Jewish women, and she used to make them work for her unclothed on Shabbat, and unclothed. So one of the reasons is that she wanted to get this idea of being this I don't know, promiscuity, but like getting used to like immorality. Because this way, if the woman is immoral, the men are slowly to follow. The women are the stronghold of the house on this thing. If the woman decides that she wants to be a little bit immoral, the man is like, following you on a leash. So she knew, so she wanted for them to be immoral, so they shouldn't get redeemed. And she did this specifically on Shabbat because she knew that if Jews keep Shabbat, no nation of the world is able to subdue them. And this is one of the things that we know. One of the ways to get Mashiach is if the entire Jewish nation will keep Shabbat. It says if the entire nation will keep 2 Shabbat, Mashiach would come immediately. So Vashti knew this, and she tried to desecrate. This is why her downfall came specifically on Shabbat. Can I bother you for a seltzer?
We have Shabbat across America, March 4th.
Well, we should do Shabbat across America every Shabbat. But yeah, that's one of the reasons thank you. One of the reasons was to sort of like get Shabbat back into where it's, get people, the unaffiliated back in. Thank you.
The Russian people need a lot of
Yeah.
Working though.
Russian Shabbaton.
Okay. So now Achashverosh is drinking, right? 7th day of the party, Shabbat, Yom Kippur, he's chugging them down. And what happens if you have a bunch of guys that are secular, non-Jewish Rashayim sitting and drinking wine? What do you think they're going to talk about? They're not going to talk about weather. They're definitely not talking about anything that's good. So he's talking about women. They said, so each advisor from his country says the women in my country are the most beautiful. The people in the Persian says the Persian women, most beautiful. And then the Madai women, I don't know what Madai did. Madai says, no, the Madai is the most beautiful. And Achashverosh is sitting there and he's like laughing. He's like, you guys are crazy. You think a Persian is the most beautiful? The most beautiful woman is from Babylon. And my proof is Vashti, the queen. She's the most beautiful woman you'll ever see in your entire life. And they're like, yeah, sure, big talker. You dress anybody up with a crown and the beautiful perfume and everything. They make anybody look like the most beautiful woman. So he says, oh yeah, I'll show you. And he gave an order, bring me Vashti without any clothes. Bring her in. So they send this message to Vashti, and they come into the queen and says, your dear husband requests your presence, but leave the clothes behind. And she's like, come again? And he's like, come. No clothes, just let's go. And she's like, and she starts getting nervous. She's like, what does that mean? And one of the problems that she was getting nervous is she didn't have so much confidence in her look. Yeah, I'm reading from the Midrashim.
Wow.
So then Achashverosh went.
Immoral issue.
What?
She's just not confident, not because it's immoral.
No, she couldn't care about that.
Wow.
So then she was nervous also that she knew that Achashverosh was very shallow. And if she goes and appears in front of everybody like this, and somebody's going to point out a flaw, then she's going to lose the love of her husband. So Achashverosh sends her back and says, listen, there's nothing you need to worry about. I think you're beautiful. I don't care what anybody else says. So then she sends back a response, a very strong response. He says, he says, if you would have been in my father Belshazzar's household, you wouldn't have been even good enough to be the stable boy, to wash the horses. You wouldn't have been good enough to clean out the stables. So from all the Midrashim.
No, but how do we know what transpired between them?
Oh, this was common. This was messengers going back and forth. It wasn't like it was.
The whole city heard about it?
I don't know about the whole city, but it was public knowledge. And most of this was public knowledge. Listen, he is going, he's not sitting in private and sending a messenger. He's sitting in front of all his buddies, all his friends, and he's like, bring me the queen without clothes. People are not going to be like, what is it? Sort of like, when the squirrel is eating a nut and all of a sudden it's like, huh? Picture that, what's everybody's doing. So he goes and she sends and now she goes she takes a knife and now twists it. She says if you can't hold your liquor, stop drinking. My father Belshazzar could have drank 10 times your amount and never would have gave such an order to send his wife without clothes. What are you, an idiotic thing? So Shalom Bayit 101, right, is starting to happen, and he goes and they send this back to Achashverosh. Achashverosh gets really upset with this. He gets really angry, and he says, "Tell the queen if she doesn't come now, she's going to get killed. She's going to get murdered, killed, whatever." So she sends it back. There's a big dialogue. So she sends it back. She says, "Nobody other than the king has seen my royal body." He says, "Don't be a fool. If you start showing everybody my body, then what happens if there's going to be another advisor, a big ruler that's going to find a liking towards me? He's going to want to assassinate you and want to take me for himself." So he says, he sends back, nonsense, I'm the strongest ruler, come. So she says, fine, and this is going back and forth with the messenger. And she says, fine, I'll come, but let me come with a veil. Don't let me be embarrassed and come out without anything. And he's like, you're not coming with no veil, and you're coming without anything. And she's like, fine, she's negotiating now. She says, I'll come without a veil, but don't let me wear the crown. It's so humiliating, just a crown I have to wear and nothing else. So he says, no, you're going to come without a veil and with the crown. Otherwise, people are going to say, yeah, you just sent some regular slave woman inside. So she decides that, she's ready to give in. She's ready to go with the thing. She says it's not worth dying for, and she's going to go with the plan, with his crazy request. And she takes one look at her reflection before it's time to present herself, and she sees this hideous rash came out all over her body. And she was flipping it, and then she turns around, and there was a little polyp that sort of looked like a tail that came out at the back end. And she's like, it ain't gonna happen. And she sends back another message, and she's like, listen, says, I'll gladly do it. I understand how important it is to you, but what's the point of doing it today? The Jews are not even in the party today. It's Yom Kippur, it's Shabbat, they're not here. Let's do it tomorrow. So figure maybe till tomorrow she'll put some lotion, creams, whatever she'll do, she'll be able to cover up, and then she'll be able to go in like that. Says that they're not here today. Let's push it off till tomorrow. this was the last straw, and the king said, enough. He banged down, in his staff, and he called, advisor huddle. They're like, what, so the first people that he came to, he's like, this is not going to stand. Okay, this is chutzpah already. How many times do I have to tell? So he goes and he called the first people that he called over was his Jewish advisors, Jewish sages, and he says, listen, what should I do? And they're like, this is a lose-lose situation for us. If we tell him to kill her, then he's going to say, you want me to kill my wife? So if we say don't kill her, he's going to be like, you don't think she deserves to be killed because of that? It's a lose-lose situation. So they tried to get out of it. And they said, listen, we've been in exile for many years. We've been under different rulers. Our minds are not settled. Better to take advisors that have been in the land for many time and their thought process is clear and settled. Better to take them and don't take us. So Achashverosh says, you know what? That's smart. I will. So he goes from the nation of Ammon and Moab. And he goes over to them. And he says, what should I do? Now, if you read the Megillah, one of his advisors' name was Memuchan. Memuchan was none other, according to many opinions, it was Haman himself. Haman was Memuchan. And the way that it would work is, let's say you had 7 advisors. The least advisor spoke first, and then you went up in level so that if you have the highest advisor say something first, everyone else is just going to agree with what he says. So they started with, and at this point in time, Memuchan, which is Haman, was the bottom of the rung. So he goes and they ask him, what should we do? And Memuchan was very eager to get rid of the queen because the astrologers told him, and they said that you're going to get killed by the king's wife. The queen is going to point a finger at you, and you're going to get killed. So he thought it was Vashti. He didn't realize that later it's going to be Esther. That's what the astrologers told him. So he says, you know what? Let's get this machshefa, this witch, out of the picture, and then we'll put in. His plan was to put. Yeah. Haman was his advisor. He's the next big character. What Haman wanted to do is get rid of Vashti and somehow squeeze in his daughter as queen. That's what he wanted to do. He says if his daughter is queen, she's not going to point a finger and kill him. So he's trying to avoid that. So he goes over and he's like, the chutzpah that this queen had. How dare you? You can't have her live. She said she disrespected you in your own house. And not only that, you heard what she said about you being a stable boy, and he's like, psyching it up. And he says, furthermore, the whole world is going to go and they're going to listen, and they're going to hear what just happened. They're going to see that this king cannot even control his own household. He's going to be able to control the entire world, the entire kingdom. He's not going to be able to do that. You can't wait to kill her. You got to kill her right now. Don't wait. And he says, even if you're going to say, listen, I did ask her, a crazy request. I asked her because when he presented this case to his advisors, he presented it in a way that he wanted Vashti to live. He kept on saying, he's like, listen, my wife, my dear wife, the queen, look what she did. He kept on throwing in queen and wife and love, all these things. But Haman had wanted to do nothing of it. And he says, no. You are going to have to kill her. You have to kill her now. Because even though you did ask her a crazy request to come in, without any clothing on, but you know how stories get distorted. At the end, it's going to be, when it's going to get to a faraway land, they're going to say oh yeah, you heard about his wife. He asked his wife to come, and she said no, and she wouldn't even listen to him. You think we don't need to pay taxes? We don't need to pay taxes. He says your entire kingdom is going to fall apart. You got to kill her. You got to kill her now. So, and then he goes on, Haman, and he says, furthermore, you have to make a proclamation. You have to make a decree. Then you have to send to the entire kingdom that if a woman does not listen to her husband, death penalty. A woman has to. Some Persians still live by this rule to this day, but generally, it's got not in the decree. So he said, send this rule to everybody. And and then he goes and says another decree: nobody can enter the king's courtyard in the inner kingdom, king's chamber, unless they get specific permission. One of the reasons that he did is he didn't want to order this decree, and then Vashti will come in and try to beg him, and with her googly eyes, she will be able to soften them up, and then he won't get murdered, and then she's going to be like, so who was the one who wanted me killed? And he's like, well, it's Haman. And then so he wanted to try to avoid that whole interaction. He says, nobody allowed to go inside of your room anymore, only if they get. So he had everything planned out. So Achashverosh was not happy with the device, but he saw that it was correct. And inside, he started, getting some little bit of hatred for Haman. It's like but he's right. So he went and he had Vashti murdered that same night. She died she was burnt alive.
But he was the first one to give the etzah. So what about everyone else?
I guess he was convincing enough. And the Midrashim that I read, I haven't read what the other one said, but the majority was, yeah. And I guess he was convincing enough that it was able to, go through it. Okay, so.
Why was she burned?
Ask Achashverosh. I don't know. He was drunk at the time. I don't know. Maybe he thought it was cool. I don't know.
No, I'm just
Possibly was. I can't think of what would be the reason, but it's very likely. Maybe because she embarrassed people. You do many. Okay. Now, one of the things that when he sent out this law that every woman has to obey her husband, it worked out very well for the Jews, because now the Jews were like, about a year or so later, when the proclamation came out that all the Jews are going to get killed on the 13th of Adar, they were all like, all the people in the entire kingdom were like, is this like one of his other crazy rules? Like, this king just sent down the rule. Nobody's going to go and give up his wife and have her murdered because, people generally like their wife. So he said generally. So he said. So people were like, okay, we can't really trust what comes out of this king's mouth. So it comes out like crazy decrees. So they said when the decree came out to kill all the Jews, they were like, okay, is this the same type of decree for killing your wife? So because of that, it sort of worked for the Jews, and it didn't actually go and they didn't actually go and kill them right away. Now, so this has all happened in the night of him being drunk. The next morning, he wakes up with a strong hangover, and he's like, bring me Vashti. And his advisors are sitting over there, and be like, what do you mean? And they're like, tell Vashti to come in. And they're like, we can't. So what do you mean? Why can't you? So he's like, you don't remember what happened last night? It's like, dude, you don't remember what you did last night? And they were like, what did I do last night? And he was like, she was murdered. She was killed. He's like, she was what? And he was like, it was your order. And then it's like slowly, started getting back to him. And he's like, and he's like, what? I can't believe it. And this happened. He got really upset at his advisors. At this point in time, also, he decided that his advisors were no good to him. And he took his advisors, and there's two opinions. Number one, is possible that he actually murdered them, except for Haman. And another opinion is that he banished them from the kingdom. One of the reasons why he didn't just kill Haman is that he wanted Haman to suffer. He had a deep hatred inside for him. And inside it was brewing. He says, it's not enough just to get him. He's the one who caused me all this pain. I'm going to cause him the pain back. But how is he going to do that? I'm going to raise him up, because the more that you're raised, the stronger you fall. So he goes and time goes on, and he was very angry. And that anger later turns into depression. And then he's all like, Vashti this, Vashti that, Vashti loved purple, Vashti loved this, Vashti loved roses. Everything was Vashti. And his don't feel bad for him. So so he's
She's evil too.
yeah. So the advisors, his new advisors were young men who are obviously very smart, and he decided to he figured, listen, the young boys, the young men, they have more of the king's intention and will in their heart. They don't have all these other plans that these old fogies have. Let's get and he started. So eventually his advisor told him, listen, he says it's not good for you. He says it's not good for they weren't Jewish. He says it's not good for you to be alone. Go get married. Time for you to find another queen. So they decided that there's going to be 4 criteria to choosing your queen. It says number 1, the girls have to be virgins. It's not befitting a king to be with a woman that was with another man. That's number 1. Number 2, she says the girl has to be pleasing to the king. There's some women that are pleasing to certain men, but no, they're not to others. This woman has to be specifically pleasing to the king. Number 3 is that these girls have to be taken against their will. One of the reasons that he wanted to be taken against their will is that this way they won't be able to brag about the home. The problem that they had with Vashti was that she was always bragging about where she came from. So he says, take them against the will. And the 4th thing is that they have to come without any makeup. Natural beauty. We got to judge them with their natural beauty, and then we'll deal with it from there. So that was the plan. The plan was that he ruled at this point in time 127 provinces. And the way that he decided is going to be one special lucky girl from each province. That she's going to come, and they're going to have this bachelor, whatever it's called, thing, whatever, yeah. So but the way that he did this is he didn't mention this to everybody yet in the beginning. They did this very smart. At first, what they did was that they sent these advisors, these missionaries, if you may, to all these 127 provinces to scout out the crop, see what we have dealing with, and see who is really pretty and who is not. Because once it comes out, everyone's going to literally throw their kids in front of they're like, my child is the most beautiful woman in the entire world. So he said, let's scout them out. So they sent these advisors to 127 provinces, and they took notes, and they said, okay, this girl is and they started making a contest without anybody knowing that it was a contest. And after that, they all came back to the capital, and then they sent out a second group. And that second group was armed with the list of the first group. And they went and they started getting the most beautiful woman of each province back to the capital. So we're going to pause the story over here, and we're going to focus a little bit about Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai he comes from the tribe of Benjamin. And one of the reasons that the salvation of Purim comes through him is because Benjamin was the only tribe that wasn't involved with selling of Yosef. So And Mordechai he raised Estelle. Estelle was orphaned at a very young age. Possibly we'll speak about this if we have time about this. What happened to her. We don't have the time for it today, but hopefully, after we finish the story, maybe we'll go back and go into details. He raised Estelle, and Estelle, her name was not actually Estelle. Her name was Hadassah, Myrtle. And also because she had a deep olive complexion. That was her color. And so she went and when everybody heard this proclamation, that it's decree that the king is bringing one lucky girl from every province to be the possible queen, everybody was literally bedazzling their daughters and throwing them out. And Estelle was the opposite. She didn't want to go out. She kept on, she was hiding. She was modest. She had no interest in being pushed into this. But her beauty, she was extremely, extremely beautiful, and her beauty was already known way beforehand. People already knew in the Shushan, they heard about Estelle. So she got drafted into the draft, I guess you could call it. So one of the things, first of all, the person that was in charge of all the women was Haggai. Haggai was one of the reasons that he was in charge is he was castrated, so he didn't really have that's the reason that he didn't have any temptation, if you may. So he goes and every single girl gets it's like you get whatever you want. The king wanted the girls to have a fabulous time, an amazing time, because there's one of the reasons that he wanted to do that is because only one girl gets to stay. Everybody else gets to go home, and he wants to give everybody should give the people that her countrymen a good report about the king. We didn't make it, but oh man, this guy is amazing. He's so nice. Yada yada yada. So what Estelle did is, how did Estelle keep kosher? She went and she told them, she's like, I'm a vegetarian. I could only eat, vegetarian foods. So this took a problem of meat and anything else. And then she asked for 7 slaves. 7 slaves, and she said 1 slave each day. This way, on Shabbat, if let's say she kept Shabbat, and if she would have had the regular slaves all the time, she would have been like, okay, why is she doing something different on Shabbat? They would have put the 2 and 2 together, say, oh, she must be Jewish. And Mordechai told her, no one can know where you came from and what's your nationality. So she kept it a secret. You know how long she kept it a secret for? 9 long years. Achashverosh did not know about where she came from, and so she is. So every single day was a different girl. So the girl that came on Shabbat thought, okay, this is how she probably goes. Some mishigas, some craziness of the aristocrat. That this is how they deal. So this way she was able to keep Shabbat without anybody knowing. So because nobody would realize that she did anything different, because she was always with her slave that was only for Shabbat. So the slave of Shabbat would not see that there was anything different than anything in the week, because she never saw her during the week. So while she was there, and the contest is still brewing, Mordechai kept on walking past by the courtyard just to see what's going on with Estelle. He didn't actually ask about Estelle, because then they will put the 2 and 2 together, and they didn't want that. So Mordechai just casually strolled through the courtyards and tried to see what's going on with Estelle. Now, when the girls got back to the capital, there was a 12-month holding period that Achashverosh made. Number one, he wanted to make sure that their menstrual cycles were normal, for certain whatever reasons that he wanted. And secondly, these are girls that are coming from far off lands. He wants to know, they literally put them in quarantine to see if they harbor any diseases. Some diseases don't manifest themselves until 3 months in advance. So he said, let's keep them, the king wants none of that stuff. So they were kept quarantined for a full year. And during that time, they were pampered with like oils and they were like a beautification process. So the
top candidate.
Yeah, the top. So and every Estelle was not only beautiful, in the physical appearance, her midot, her personality was amazing also. And Achashverosh saw this. She spoke to everybody like they were part of her family. Like, she was so humble, down to earth. And he was like, listen, my last wife, she was a little bit over the top. I'm in for something, he was very attracted to that. And then he was like, you have, what is the saying? You have girls that from far they're very attractive, but from close they're far from attractive. So he says Estelle was attractive from far and from close, but she had the full package on every single level. So the king now, saw right away that there was a connection brewing between him and Estelle, at least just from his side, and he realized that, listen, I'm not going to jump the gun. Last time I jumped the gun, I got to take everything in a process slowly. And in fact, Haggai, when he saw Estelle the first time, he already told his advisor, he says, listen, this is going to be the next queen. It's like, sometimes He's like, Like he knew already that this is, she's going to make it all the way. And every time, like she, when she's going to, they had meetings with the kings, I don't know, they took strolls in the park, whatever they did, and got to know the potential queen candidate, and so they got to use whatever beautification process they wanted. So when Haggai came to Esther, when her turn, she was like, okay, so what do you want? I don't need anything. Yeah. Be like, oh, come on, please, just take something. She's like, no, I don't want anything. And he's like, listen, you got to take something. The king's gonna have me killed if I'm sending in a girl without any makeup, anything like that. But this just shows how much she didn't even want to be there. She was the only, and the king knew that. The king knew that she didn't want it. I don't know if he thought she was playing hard to get or whatever there's that, but the king knew that this was the situation. So after going through the entire 127 girls, he made a decree. He's like, this is going to be the one. Esther won the candidate, right? She is the one who became the queen, and they had a party. But this time, he goes over to the king, wants to make another big party, and Esther said, no need for that. No need for the big party. You know what happened last time to the party. Yeah, let's not do any party. Let's send, make a small party. Send gifts to the people so they could celebrate it in their house. So the king found this very, very attractive. He liked that way that it sounds. He sees this girl. Yeah, this is a very humble girl. Had his head on her shoulders. And but one of the reasons that he wanted to have a party is he wanted Esther to start drinking because he wanted to know where she's from. He keeps on asking her. Imagine throughout this entire time, a king. Imagine you're dating a guy or a guy's dating a girl. And they're not telling you where they're from and what's their nationality. Yeah, Jewish people, it's harder because you have to be Jewish. But imagine you're, I'm not, and to a king nonetheless. Like this could be who knows what. The king, and somehow God made it that it happened. They got married without him knowing it. But it still bothered Achashverosh. And he wanted to know.
But they were from the same city, right?
Yeah.
Mordechai
was from Shushan, but he was exiled to Shushan. He was originally from Israel. Then I think Mordechai's process was he was originally Israel. He's part of the Sanhedrin. He got exiled to Babylon. Then came the rebuilding of the temple by Cyrus. So he went back to Israel, and then that stopped. So he went back to Shushan. So whatever like that. So he was living in there at that time, but he wasn't originally a Persian native. What's Persia? Native, that's Iran, I think, right? Iran nowadays. So where were we? Oh, so the king is going and saying, what's going on with you? What's your nationality? You got to tell me. And she says, I'm an orphan. I don't have anything. He's like, yeah, but what's your nationality? What's your And she kept on pushing off the topic. So he said, you know what? If I get her something to drink, maybe she'll, loosen up a bit. But it didn't happen. And then he decided what he's going to do is he's going to do for the entire year, nobody has to pay taxes in honor of his celebration of his wedding. The entire world is tax-free. Imagine that would happen if Trump, yeah. So he one of the reasons that he did is that for sure some of her blood relatives are going to be like, if the king was willing to do that for the entire world that he owns, to imagine what he'll do for a blood relative. So they'll for sure start speaking up. Be like, yeah, that's why she's my cousin, So, but nobody came up. And even though the Jews knew that she was a Jewish, the Jews still kept their mouth shut because they knew Mordechai said, and not to happen. And so they kept it quiet. So after failed attempt after failed attempt, finally Achashverosh goes over to her and says, listen, and he speaks her straight on. He says, I want you to tell me your nationality. So Esther replies back, tell me about yourself first. So Achashverosh says, I'm from royal blood. So she says, I too am from royal blood. He's like, yeah, but what's your nationality? Where you come from? And she says, permission to speak freely, my dear king. And he says, permission granted. And she says, listen, I don't understand you. Says, you're pressuring me to say something that I obviously don't want to say. Says, the last time that this happened, your wife was murdered. Do you really want to put yourself into that situation again? Rather, trust me, and you'll know in due time. When it's a time, I'll let you know. And she's like, and then she goes on further and she says, I know it's your advisors that are trying to force you, because they were all upset. Like, why did she get it, not from our nationality? Maybe the Persian girl should have gotten it, who we don't even know where she's from. And you get her to get married. Maybe it's better. So the advisors are pressuring her. Where is she from? Where is she from? And she says, I know the advisors are pressuring you about this, but remember what the advisors did to the advice they gave you with Vashti.
What happened to Persian background checks?
There was no background checks.
No?
Yeah. So he goes and he goes to Esther and he says, listen, he says, I hear you talk a lot about advisors. Maybe you have a recommendation for an advisor. She says, in fact, I do. I know Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar, they had Jewish advisors. They had the advisor Daniel. a very, very amazing advisor. Maybe it's a good idea to find a Jewish sage and put him as a high advisory power. And he's like, I've heard about, the Jewish sages and the Jewish advisors. He says, but do they exist? Are they around anymore? And he says, yes, in fact, there is one. There is a guy by the name of Mordechai here. He's very wise. And the king was very impressed with this recommendation because he knew of Mordechai and he knew how wise and smart he was. So he says, you know what? Done. And he goes to Mordechai, and Mordechai gets promoted. He gets promoted to one of a very high level advisor. So the king goes over, he invites Mordechai in, gives him the badge, whatever it is that he gets, and then the first thing of advice that he asks him, he says, tell me, I am dying to know what's the nationality of my wife. Give me advice and how am I supposed to figure out what's her nationality? So Mordechai says, one answer, jealousy. And he's like, go on. So he says, make the queen think that you're not happy with her. Bring all the girls back to Shushan. Think of it as a round two. Maybe then she'll feel pressured and she'll tell you. So one of the reasons that Mordechai did this was it was very suspicious that all of a sudden Esther becomes queen. The next day, Mordechai becomes the second thing. It'd be like, Mordechai, everyone knew he's a Jew. Maybe Esther and Mordechai, maybe they're in cahoot. Maybe she's really Jewish. So to sort of dispel this, the suspicion, he says, yeah, invite everybody back. Let them all come back and let's see what happens then. So this made everybody very happy. Haman wanted his daughter. All the other people, they wanted their daughter, their thing. So they were very happy now with Mordechai. Mordechai was like, he did good for them. So again, he brought all the girls back. It didn't help. He stuck with Esther. Esther kept her guns shut. And but slowly it came out to Achashverosh that Esther lived with Mordechai. Mordechai raised her. So he raised her, and she says, he presents. He's like, were you raised by Mordechai? She says, yeah, I was raised. I was orphaned by a young age in my country, and I was raised by him. But still, even though the clues were there that Esther was Jewish, Achashverosh didn't get it. It was like Hashem made it that he wouldn't understand it. Even this is the thing that there's sometimes that the truth slaps you in your face and you can't see it. If God doesn't want you to see it, you're not going to see it. So Achashverosh didn't know what happened. Okay, a few more minutes and we'll be done. So. While this, as time progresses, there were two advisors by the name of Bigsan and Seresh. They were not so happy about this whole situation with Estelle being queen and Vashti being murdered. They were actually very upset. Vashti was one of their relatives, with Bigsan and Seresh. So they decided what they were going to do is they were going to do an assassination plot against the king and the queen. They were going to kill them. And one of the reasons what their back plan was is that there was another, big country, at that point, it was Greece. And they said, listen, Greece, if we go and we take over, Achashverosh, and we'll get very strong power if we bring Greece in. So that was their idea. So they decided that they're going to plot to destroy Achashverosh. And another reason is that they felt, that it took it into them personally because originally when they had a very high power. When Mordechai got promoted, he took their power and they got demoted. They were originally in charge of all the king's guards, the king's personal guard, and that title went to Mordechai, and they got demoted to being in charge of guarding the king's apartments, which was standing on their feet all day, and they just were not happy with it. So now they also want to get back at Mordechai for taking away this. So they had a whole plan that they were actually going to frame the whole thing on Mordechai. There was a whole thing going in that they were planning. So. They decided they're going to plan this. They weren't native to Persia, so their native tongue was Tarsian, and they decided they're going to speak Tarsian, and this is how they're going to make their plot and their plan. What they didn't know is Mordechai comes from the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is required to know all 70 languages. In order to become part of, one of the reasons is that let's say you need to interrogate somebody. If you need to interrogate somebody, you can't use a translator because you're a judge. You can't use a translator because who knows, maybe the translator is changing something. And if it's a life sentence, you have to, the Jewish law is very, very meticulous on all these things. So every Jewish person that was in Sanhedrin had to know all the 70 languages. One of the prerequisites. Think about when you try to learn Spanish, you're like una habla español. Imagine trying to learn 70 languages. So you can tell you that the level of wisdom that Mordechai had. So Mordechai knew this Tarsian. He knew what it's one of the languages. So he overhears them speaking this Tarsian, and he hears the whole plot. And there's an halakha that we're supposed to pray for the benefit of our kingdom that we are living in. And he says, if I hear that there is an assassination attempt, I got to go notify the king. So he goes over and he notifies to Esther, and he says, tell her and tell the king in your name about this attempt. So they tell this to Achashverosh. Achashverosh goes and he quickly sends a dispatch, armies to Bigsan and Seresh, and they hear people are coming. They were trying to poison the king. They tried to get rid of the poison, but they still found traces of the poison enough to convict them. And they were convicted, and they were murdered in public so that everybody could see what happened to somebody who was attempted assassination to the king. Now, Haman was, he was very close with Bigsan and Zeresh, and so he took this personally also. This is where because of Mordechai and Esther, they got an assassinate. They got to kill Bigsan and Zeresh. This is where already the plot to start exterminating the Jews began. And one of the when Esther said, well, after this whole thing happened, Esther goes and wants it to written down in the book, in the king's book, that Mordechai should get the reward. That it wasn't me, Esther, but rather it was Mordechai. And she went and she had it written down that it was done by the hand of Mordechai. And B'ezrat Hashem will continue next week with, hopefully we'll be able to do we'll stop here for the story, and we'll continue it with next week with part 2. I'm hoping to do it in 2 parts, maximum 3, but I'm hoping to do it in 2 parts. Any questions?
Yeah. So Mordechai told Esther to tell the king
In her name. That it wasn't him.
why?
Oh, maybe he wanted to raise her up in his eyes, show that he's, I don't know, whatever. He felt that that was better for her.
But she did the opposite.
She did it in his name. And we'll soon see that's going to be the whole foundation of the whole Purim story. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it true that she was never with Achashverosh?
I was hoping that question wouldn't be asked. No, but it's good that you asked it. So there is first of all, they had a baby together.
Oh.
So, which we'll soon see. I don't want to give any spoiler alerts. So, but most of the time, every time except for once, we'll soon see, she was with him not by her choice. And she was Kaka, whatever. They're saying maybe I'll speak about it a little bit. We'll bring about it. But yeah, there's other opinions that she sent. Certain. She was able to get people from the dark side to help her out in that situation. Whatever. Maybe we'll speak about it at that point. The Shadim, the demons. So I don't know. We'll see how much we'll bring it up. Any other questions? No questions. All right. Chazak Baruch.